Hello everybody, welcome to another Mega Projects video. This one's all about the F-35 Lightning, long requested, and oh my god, the finances in this one are just insane. So let's just jump into it. This is a long one. It's proven to be one of the most expensive and controversial projects of our time. The F-35 Lightning, initially intended as a means of cutting the costs and improving the efficiency of any modern military's arsenal, has now become the symbol of the bloated military-industrial complex. On one side, there are those who point to the success of the engineering goals and the value of the advancements in both aeroplane design and computer capability. On the other side are those who point to the rising development costs, missed deadlines, and call into question the need for such a destructive aircraft in our enlightened age. On our Mega Projects video today, we're going to cover the development, the design, and, of course, the controversies surrounding the F-35 Lightning. The Joint Strike Fighter, or JSF program, was the amalgamation of two aircraft development programs, the Common Affordable Lightweight Fighter, or CAF program, and the Joint Advanced Strike Fighter Technology, JAST program. Following their integration, the program was renamed to the Joint Strike Fighter. This new contract called for a state-of-the-art jet that would be capable of replacing the F-16, A-10, FA-18 Super Hornet, and the AV-8B Harrier. The theory was that by rolling all of these different aircraft into one, they could cut out many of the costs associated with operating a fleet of assorted jets that could be purchased as a one-size-fits-all alternative to purchasing an entire fleet of jets, each with a single operating purpose and their own personnel training requirement. This meant that you'd just pay for one training program and there'd be lots of other streamlining and economies of scale. But let's see how that went. When this program was announced in 1993, it quickly became known that it was going to be one of, if not the most lucrative contract of the century. Many of America's biggest military contractors participated in the first round of entries for this jet. Eventually, these were whittled down to just two manufacturers, Boeing and Lockheed Martin. Both were given $750 million in order to produce a prototype jet that they would submit to a panel for analysis and testing. The two companies were told that they were not allowed to exceed this pay limit during their initial development due to concerns that the companies would bankrupt themselves if they were allowed to overspend on development, which gives you just a bit of an idea how lucrative this contract was going to be. These are giant companies. 8 years of development later, and the two airplane manufacturers were ready to submit their jets. Boeing had produced the X-32, and Lockheed Martin submitted the X-35. Both had taken different approaches to their methods of achieving vertical takeoff and landing. Boeing used a similar method to the existing Harrier jet, which, if you're curious about how that engine works, I'd recommend that you take a look at our entire video about the Harrier jet, where we go into detail about the inner workings of the Pegasus engine. However, in October of 2001, Lockheed Martin won out with their use of a shaft-driven lift fan design, which has proven to be vastly more capable than Boeing's submission in almost every area, including being the first aircraft in history to be capable of VTOL and supersonic flight. Some might also say that the A-32 lost because, well, it looks really stupid, and it does. Now, the way that we'd normally try to structure the development part of one of these videos is by describing the developments in chronological order. However, this being such a new technology with a lot of classified information surrounding it, we have to infer a lot of the timings and the various developments that went on, etc. All that is to say is that while we always try to bring you the facts here on Mega Projects, we've had to take just a little bit of artistic license with some of the events and upgrades made to the jet over time. So with that out of the way, let's get into development, or a best guess at development. For Lockheed Martin, this was the contract they'd been waiting for, and that was because the engineers at the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works had already begun working on their shaft-driven lift fan engine format about 15 years prior to the announcement of the contract. They were certain that once the AV-8B Harrier had run its course, they would be in a prime position to snap up the contract for its replacement, and that's exactly what happened. After receiving the JSF contract, Lockheed Martin began further development upon their jet. The X-35 was designed to be a proof of concept with regard to its flying and takeoff capabilities. Their aim now was to take it from that experimental format to a fully capable combat vehicle. This would involve making space within the aircraft for mission avionics, the weapons bay, and the extensive computer systems that be added. With these kind of adjustments, it is often a matter of fine lines, adding and removing seemingly insignificant amounts of material so as to maintain balance all over the aircraft. Often these adjustments take the form of only a few centimeters of material being added or removed, but there can be hundreds and maybe even thousands of these tiny little adjustments taking place over time. After 2 years of development, the engineers at the Lockheed Skunk Works had managed to get the jet into the precise shape that they wanted. However, it had also cost them about 1,000 kilos, that's about 2,200 pounds of added weight to the aircraft, with the majority of the weight and alterations coming from the expansion of its weapons bay. This added weight had rendered the aircraft incapable of all three vertical takeoff criteria. So, in order to get the weight down, they sent in the SWAT team. We're not even joking here, they formed something called the STOVL Weight Attack Team, who were tasked with cutting off the excess weight from the jet. Following this aggressive diet, the jet lost 1,400 kilograms, 3,000 pounds, and was beginning to take its final form. It was at this point that the decision was made to create 3 separate specialized formats of the aircraft: the F-35A, B, and C, one for each branch of the armed forces. A for Army, B for boats, and C can't think of something for Air Force. Only joking, these actually denoted the 3 separate specializations that each format had. F-35A would be the lightest of the 3 variants and was specifically designed for Air Force use. Because they would have access to Air Force Base runways, there would be no need for the jet's VTOL capability, and they'd only be capable of conventional takeoff and landing. This also made it the lightest of the 3 variants and the most agile, capable of handling 9 Gs, that's 9 times the pull of gravity, during a sharp turn. The F-35B would be designed for versatile use between any of the 3 services, and it would be the only one of the 3 variants capable of vertical takeoff and landing. This would make it a good vehicle for forward operating bases that are close to the front lines and might not have a paved runway. The F-35C would be designed for use on naval carriers. The design would be specially modified to be able to take the high forces associated with the catapult-assisted takeoffs and the arrested recoveries required for aircraft carrier operations. This variant would also have larger wings than either of the 2 other variants, drastically improving the stability of the aircraft at lower speeds that are required for landing on an aircraft carrier. Later development added integrated folding wingtips to assist with the storage of the jets in the limited space under the carrier deck. Finally, there was the engine, which had been the subject of constant research, tweaking, and improvements throughout the entire 6-year development process. During the competition phase, the vehicle that Boeing had pitched had used vectored thrust engines. If you recall, this was the same engine format that was in the Harrier jet. This technology was well understood and would be a safe bet, as it was known to be reliable and relatively cheap. However, it was also inefficient, and it was believed that it was already reaching the upper limits of its performance. Lockheed Martin, on the other hand, had submitted a shaft-driven lift fan design. The decision to go with an unproven technology was a serious gamble, really expensive gamble, but it did seem to pay off as it was already exceeding the capability of the vectored thrust engines. So yes, this technology worked in an experimental aircraft, but once all the armaments, combat computers, and avionics had been put into the jet, not to mention the significant amount of weight they would carry as well, there was a risk that the engine was not going to be able to perform, and so Lockheed Martin put a significant amount of research into perfecting this new jet technology in order to ensure that it could reliably operate in a swath of different conditions. So all of that being said, you might now be wondering, well, what is a shaft-driven lift fan, and how is it different to what the Harrier had been using? To which we'd say, well, thanks for asking the question, because that's the next part of the video! The shaft-driven lift fan, or SDLF, design is pretty simple in theory, as we've said in our previous VTOL videos. The key difference between a regular jet engine and a VTOL jet engine is that ability to produce thrust in both the horizontal direction and the vertical one. What's more, it needs to be able to produce enough downward thrust that it can lift the entire weight of the plane off the ground. In the case of the F-35, the SDLF configuration uses 2 separate engines rather than the conventional single engine that the Harrier had used. And this is one of the coolest parts about this jet. Seeing footage of it entering into its S-VTOL mode looks more like something out of a sci-fi movie. The process of transitioning to VTOL mode is a particularly complicated one, almost entirely controlled by the jet's onboard computers, and the engine's full authority digital engine control software. In a compartment behind the pilot is a lift fan, which during normal flight is disconnected from the larger engine system. When switching to VTOL mode, a clutch in the gearbox engages, connecting the two separate parts of the engine system and activates the lift fan. It's at this point that the doors in the fuselage above and below the lift fan open up. At the same time as all of that, the other half of the engine starts making its own modifications. In a truly mind-boggling display of engineering, an assembly called the three-bearing swivel duct enacts what can only be described as a scene from Transformers, beginning with two doors directly beneath the primary engine exhaust port opening up. This swivel duct system can be used to adjust the engine exhaust anywhere within 105 degrees of continuous range, from straight back to directly downwards. After all of these transformations have taken place, the sum total of the engine's vertical thrust is around 40,000 pounds, or just under 55,000 newtons. This is what makes the SDLF design such an excellent alternative to the Harrier's engine design. Where the Harrier's vectored thrust engines lost a great deal of energy in the process of diverting the flow of air downwards, this more efficient method cuts down the amount of fuel and energy needed to create an equivalent amount of thrust. All that is to say, despite the F-35 having a less powerful engine than the Harrier, it can still outperform and outmaneuver it in almost all situations. And the stats coming back from Lockheed back this theory up. Despite the F-35 being more than twice the weight of the Harrier and having only 75% of the Harrier's engine power, it is capable of carrying 11 tons more upon takeoff than the Harrier's maximum takeoff weight, while maintaining the ability to reach the speed of sound, a feat that the Harrier was never able to achieve. So returning to the F-35's development story, we now find ourselves nearing the completion of the first development phase. The year is 2006, and the F-35 is about to be revealed to the world, with Lockheed Martin wrapping up their initial development phase. All that was left to do was give this jet a name, and what they landed on was the F-35 Lightning II in honor of Lockheed's World War II era plane, the P-38 Lightning. Finally, after years of development, the jet was ready for public view. However, this was only the first test flight of the jet, and it would not truly be ready for combat for another 10 years, not that this would stop Lockheed Martin from taking orders for the jet. Between the years of 2006 and 2011, each variant of the F-35 was rigorously flight tested, highlighting some serious design flaws which caused further delays to a deadline that was already months behind. During this testing period, they were also focusing on organizing the jet's production line in preparation for the completion of flight testing. Once the F-35 was revealed to the world, there was an initial positive reaction among those who take interest in such things. This was going to be the next generation of jet technology, what is known as the fifth generation fighter jet. Few jets currently fall into this category. Currently, there are only 4 jets in active service that come under this banner, but these are at the bleeding edge of jet technology, and the F-35 is certainly no exception. The jet Lockheed Martin had come up with was a multi-role combat aircraft capable of VTOL and supersonic flight. It could be used as an air superiority machine and as a strike fighter. It was capable of being used for electronic warfare, intelligence gathering, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions. In short, they'd achieved every goal that they'd set out to, and it had cost billions, and it was going to cost even more in the coming years. You remember early on in the video when we said that the JSF program originated from several development programs? Do you remember how one of them was called the Common Affordable Lightweight Fighter Program? Yeah, so we're pretty sure they meant the affordable part of that in a sarcastic, jokey kind of way, because the program has cost upwards of $400 billion as of October 2020, and that still isn't the end of the spending. Estimates put the program's lifetime cost at some $1.727 trillion. Just let that sink in for a moment. $1.727 trillion with a T. So a little bit of context here. You know, the International Space Station, often called the most expensive object in existence, is valued at about $150 billion, so you could buy 11 of them for the cost of the F-35 program, and you'd still have $75 billion left over. We could say that many dollar bills laid out on the ground would cover the surface area of the Earth 1.5 times over, and that would just be a fun representation of just how much money was spent on this program, but it would also be misleading. You see, the issue with these kind of statistics is that while they aren't incorrect, they certainly don't give a good representation of the truth. That number, 1.727 trillion, is often touted by those who wish to detract from the program to emphasize just how out of control military spending has gotten. It's also a high estimate from a third-party source. While it's difficult to pinpoint precisely how much the program will cost in its entirety, it will lie somewhere between 1.1 and 1.727 trillion. Now, those are still absolutely astronomically high numbers. I don't think anyone is going to dispute that. However, they don't account for the hundreds of billions that will be made from selling this jet to foreign militaries. The total value of orders is already in the billions of dollars, and this is only going to rise over the coming decades. At some point, there's going to be a tipping point where the orders coming in will outweigh the costs, and it will become profitable enough to begin paying back the large investment that the US and participating countries have provided. However, the issue with that conservative statistic of 1.1 trillion is not accounting for the fact that even though the US paid for the jets to be developed, they will also have to pay for the jets when adding them to their military arsenal, not to mention the required infrastructure, pilot training, and other such costs, all of which will be on the military's bill and therefore cost the US taxpayer more. Now, some argue that that money could have been better spent on infrastructure projects, researching renewable energy, or other such worthy causes. However, the main point we want to emphasize here isn't whether or not this was a good use of money. The point of this was just how easy it is to manipulate facts and statistics just to make a point. In reality, this topic does have its faults and its positives. This project alone has pushed the capability of computers well beyond what we thought possible in areas such as material engineering, spacecraft design, the medical field, you name it. The research that has come from this project will assist mankind for decades to come. On the other hand, it has brought out some of humanity's worst traits: greed, warmongering, and tribalism, to name a few. It's pretty much an unspoken agreement that companies like Lockheed Martin don't optimize their company structure so that projects like this can be artificially extended, thus making them far more money than if they're done it on time and on budget. Or in their own words, like many high technology programs before it reaching that capability, has put the program above its original budget and behind the planned schedule. What Lockheed Martin had produced was nothing short of mind-boggling in its capabilities. They had effectively taken a stealth bomber, fighter jet, ground support vehicle, reconnaissance aircraft, a supercomputer, and an information relay station, and crammed it all into a jet and made it travel faster than the speed of sound. The three jet variants have a length of 15.7 meters, the A and B variants have a wingspan of 10.7 meters, and the C has a wingspan of 13.1 meters. All three jets stand somewhere around 4.5 meters tall and have an empty weight between 13,150 kilograms and 15,700 kilograms. Each has a maximum payload between 6,000 to 8,000 kilograms, depending on the variant, and the maximum range is typically 1,200 nautical miles, or about 2,200 kilometers. They can also comfortably climb to 15,000 meters, that's about 50,000 feet. But those numbers aren't what really makes this jet so remarkable. What brings this jet above pretty much any other jet out there is its avionics and its computer systems, and like we said before, this thing is pretty much a supercomputer with wings. There are a suite of sensors and avionics aboard these jets. Obviously, this is some of the areas that the military are tightest-lipped about, although some of the ones we know about are the AN/APG-81 active electronically scanned array radar, the AN/ASQ-239 Barracuda electronics warfare system, the AN/AAQ-40 electro-optical targeting system, and the AN/ASQ-242 communication, navigation, and identification suite. So what does all of that mean, I hear you asking? Well, we've got absolutely no idea, but what we do know is that because of these sensors and a very cool helmet, the pilot can now literally see through the fuselage of the jet. Seriously, the pilot has a pair of glasses in their helmet that, when activated, create not only a heads-up display, but a real-time AR environment that allows the pilot to see threats in any direction, night vision included of course, and allows for identifying threats that otherwise would be invisible to the pilot because of things like clouds and the fuselage of the jet getting in the way. The helmets alone, by the way, price tag of $400,000. This jet also has a voice recognition system, so an F-35 pilot can ask the jet to do key tasks like adding milk to the shopping list or asking how many miles they are from the sun. It also does military stuff as well, we think, but you gotta fill in the gaps when it's all classified. There are about 101 more examples of these kind of groundbreaking technologies packed within the jet alone, not to mention the advancements in materials production, engine design, and efficiency and aerodynamics. The list really does go on, many of them having applications outside of the military. By this point, pretty much all the research has now become focused on perfecting the computer systems, both in the software and hardware departments. This is one of the main aspects of the jet that has justified the ever-rising cost and the retreating deadline. The design of the software within the jet allows for it to be updated and upgraded pretty much like your smartphone. With Lockheed Martin producing regular updates to the jet software, it will be able to remain at the cutting edge of jet technology for much longer than jets could have in previous generations. However, it goes further than that. Thanks to the unparalleled connection between the hardware within the jet and the software, in particular the interaction between the software and the jet's engine, further updates to the software will be able to improve the jet's handling, maneuvering efficiency, and even engine efficiency and top speed. Now, we should also add that thanks to the secretive nature of the project, some of that is fact-based speculation based upon what we already know of the jet and the inner workings of the technology, which is, well, intentionally sparse. As for the cost, well, they are not cheap. As of 2019, the average cost for one of these jets was $108 million, with various discounts for participating countries based on their contribution to the project, although it is not precisely known what these discounts are. One thing is for sure though, no matter how you spin the numbers on this project, it will never actually turn a profit. But this was never the expectation going in. However, by this point, with public opinion becoming more and more negative on this project, the US government is starting to tighten the purse strings and put pressure on Lockheed Martin to reduce their current overspending. And then you gotta wonder why they weren't doing that in the first place. So we left off in October 2011 with the end of intensive testing and the first jets almost ready for use. The US was the first to begin flight training and implementation within their various branches of the military beginning in early 2012. Some raised safety concerns over the jet being implemented so early in the testing phases. However, the military pressed on, and in 2018 the US Marine Corps became the first of the US military branches to clear the F-35s for combat using F-35Bs from the amphibious assault ship the USS Essex, and carrying out their first combat strike mission in September of that same year against a Taliban target. However, the US was not actually the first to use the F-35 in a combat mission, or at least they don't claim to be. You can never know with those kinds of things. That honor has been claimed by the Israeli Defense Force, who conducted 2 airstrikes using F-35As in the Middle East. Details of this engagement are sparse, however, they have been confirmed by Israeli officials. Including the US, a total of 14 nations are currently in the process of ordering or are already in use of the F-35, 8 of which were participating program partners, these being the US, the UK, Italy, the Netherlands, Australia, Norway, Denmark, Canada, with the remaining 6 being foreign military sales, including Israel, Japan, South Korea, Poland, Belgium, and Singapore. Various other nations, such as Switzerland, are looking into buying several of these jets. However, there have been no confirmations as of yet. With the service record of the F-35 being so short, there's not a great deal of information with regard to any recent operations, thanks to the secrecy of any military that uses them. We do know that the jet is capable of air-to-air combat, otherwise known as dogfighting. However, there are so far no reports of any air-to-air altercations involving an F-35. But what would happen in the event of a dogfight between an F-35 and another jet? Well, it is believed that the F-35 would win against almost any jet, save for the F-22 Raptor, which is said to have superior maneuverability to the F-35, although many of the test pilots that have become familiar with the F-35 dispute this. The F-22 was the newest jet in America's fleet prior to the implementation of the F-35, and it was designed to be used solely as an air superiority machine, whereas the F-35 was intended as a multi-role vehicle. So the jury is out on who would win, however, as the F-22 is in the sole use of the US, and the US will only sell the F-35 to nations that it has a good relationship with, so we're going to be waiting a while before we find out who would win that fight. And I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.